All righty, I think we can go ahead and get started.
All right.
Um, yep, thank you.
All right, guys. So thank you for being here. So my name is Manvendra Singh Brad. So I'm a fifth year PhD student at Clemson University. So with me, so I have my mentorship committee members, Tran Thu. So she's a postdoc uh, in Dr. Jackson's lab. And then we have Jason, another postdoc on the committee. So he's at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. And then we organized this seminar series for you guys. And then we have four wonderful speakers for you, Dr. Arif Ashraf, Dr. Katie Murphy, and Dr. Nicholas Gladman, and Karen Menzel. So they are going to share their journeys with you, so how they navigated difficulties during their time in academia. And then we all can learn from their experience. And then but once they are done with their presentations, at the end, we'll have a QA session, question answer session. And then you all guys can post your questions in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and then ask the question directly to the speakers. So with that, I would like to invite Dr. Arif Ashraf to share his screen and then share his experience with us.
See my screen.
Yeah. So Dr. Arif Ashraf, yeah, so just a quick introduction. So Dr. Arif Ashraf is assistant professor of biology at Howard University. So he is a plant cell biologist, and his lab studies cell division to understand plant development, environmental stress response, and biomedical application of drug discovery using Arabidopsis thaliana and Z-maze as model systems. He is a co-founder of Plant Postdocs and host of No Time to Read post podcast. In his career, he served as an ASPB ambassador, plant fellow, early career scholar at NAASC, editorial member of Maze GDB, and feature editor of Molecular Plant. All right, so Dr. Ashraf, all to you now.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation. This is the first time I'm going to talk about my career. Most of the time, I just talk about the science I do. So I'm excited and also nervous a little bit. But what I'm just going to do, use that allocated 20 minutes to share basically my experience. So whatever I say, just take all of these things with a grain of salt. And I'll basically focus on my last 10 years. I think that kind of correlates and relates with what I'm going to talk today. And so I want to tell a story of myself and what I learned over the last 10 years, and also talk about that dip. You might be still wondering, what is that dip? So most of the times, I will start with something very basic, and then I'll go all the details, that we always, as a human being, think that, oh, whenever we put a lot of effort, we'll see the results or outcome coming. In academia or in many greatest journey, most of the time that is not true. It's not a linear pathway. You put the effort and for many, many years, you don't see the result. And I had many of those dips in my career when I was a graduate student, when I was a postdoc, and still now, because I work so hard and sometimes I don't see progress, although I just keep grinding every day. Until very recently, I read a book by Seth Godin, and he basically pointed that thing that all of those journey and everything we go and to the other side, we all go through that dip, that many years of hard work where you don't see the progress. So what I'm actually going to do today, as it is a career development webinar or workshop, and if I was just started thinking about what I do if I am an audience, and so I look at the banner or the flyer, and then I thought, okay, there are some keywords I can pick it up, and then basically revolve around all my shared idea or experience around those keywords, like skill networking, how to build a portfolio, struggling how to be successful in academia. And also it doesn't come through very normally or simply. All of us go through many difficulties. So to do that, what I'll actually have to do, I actually first part, I have to walk you through my career journey. And from each point, I'll basically pick few things that how each of my segment of the career, I had the training, and during that training, not only had the training, I built that network, and how all this training and network actually comes together to create that portfolio profile over the years. So I'll not talk a lot about my undergrad, but it is very important how I actually started working on the plant. So I grew up in Bangladesh. It's a very small country in South Asia, and I went to one of the schools there, and I had a major in the biochem and molecular biology. And none of my peers actually think about the plant, and I also, like many of them, started my undergraduate research in a hospital where I had to work with the parasitic infection, the bloods and feces, and I didn't like it. And for a while, I started thinking as an undergrad, maybe I'll not be able to do the science if the environment is like that. Until one of my faculty actually convinced that, Arif, you don't have to be always working on that. You can actually come to my lab and do some bioinformatics. And this is how I actually started working with the R, Python, and started working with some promoter analysis. At one point, my PI, undergrad PI, she was very convinced and very impressed. And she was telling that if some of this promoter you are actually identified through bioinformatics analysis, you can actually clone them and test them. I said, I don't think so. I think I will not like this benchmark and stuff. And she said that, no, we work with plant. So it's very easy. It is not like your hospital experience. And then this is the part I actually, as an undergrad, started cloning a gene and took from Arabidopsis and all sort of things. And I started like it. And this is how my plant journey actually started. And one of the things I was very convinced that, okay, I can take a plant and just chop it and do whatever. I have no moral and ethical obligation to it, and then do all sort of things I want to do. But that is the time actually I got introduced to the Arabidopsis, and I found that, oh, this is pretty cool. I really don't have to go outside of the lab. I can do whatever I want to do in the lab. And with that idea, basically, I applied to Japan for the graduate program, and I got one of the very prestigious scholarship from the Japanese government. And there, actually, I started working solely mostly on the Arabidopsis. And if you know me from my Twitter, you see my Twitter handle also reflects Arabidopsis. But that is not the point. If I just do my PhD on the plant cellular molecular biology, it would be only the training. There are multiple things happened. What I actually explain is that I led the science or my fate to decide where I should go. When I was a graduate student there in Japan, we had some very fantastic system where I can apply for independent grant, which my PI or me, none of our expert. So I took advantage of that. So there are two very important events I will mention. So during my time as a graduate student, I met the person who was from Canada for sabbatical. He's the first person found the plant cell cycle inhibitor gene. And then during his sabbatical, I had a fantastic time chit-chatting with him. And he said that, okay, why don't you apply? And because your boss is not interested in the cell cycle, you just come to my lab and just build your own thing. So this is the time I actually applied independently to do some cell cycle, cell division stuff. And I went to Canada for a summer to do that. At the same time, I met an awesome scientist while in a conference, and he's from University of Tokyo. And then that time I was trying to do some very fancy experiment, like using some polarized transporter and then use radioisotope in planta, so which is like a more real life experience the plant will go through. But the problem was that many facilities cannot afford that. So I used to go to Tokyo University for a week to do this experiment, just travel across the half of the Japan. And that time to access that radioisotope center, you need all the clearance. So my professor down there actually made me the visiting student over there. The reason I mentioned these two events, why these are very important, if you see that it was not my training, but the network I built with the people, let's say from a summer internship and the collaboration, that actually leads to my rest of the life, or right now, what I do, everything about the cell division. And when I was going for a postdoc, I tried to keep my research direction same, pretty much on the polarized proteins. I kind of made a polarized journey, but also on the cell division at the same time. So this is the place where I actually started working in the maze. And my first introduction, my first summer, my first day, everything was actually going directly to the field because I joined the lab as a postdoc in the summer. I was sweating, covered with the pollen, but one of the best thing I like about working in the maze, like you have to make many important decisions why you're not comfortable. outside in the sun, out in the sun, and in the field. I go and found that one of my plant is down, which was a homozygous mutant by raccoon. And then I have to quickly decide, like, oh, what would be the best possible case scenario? And while I walk in this field, I always feel like that, oh, my figure 5 will be missing if I cannot do that cross. So I think like it forces me to be a better scientist and use the presence of mind. But that is not only the point. When I was a postdoc, again, it was not only the training. I built myself to become a cell biologist and the maze geneticist. I did something alongside. And on one thing I always mention that at the time I started a postdoc, just after my one semester, it was basically pandemic. And many of the times and many of the things I did in life, when I see there is nothing, my mom always said that, why you complain? You can do that. So I found that for the job market and stuff, there is a like huge, knowledge gap, and there's no real platform. So me and my other friend Sunil, we together basically we started something called Plant Postdoc when I was a first year postdoc. And if you're in the audience, there's a huge chance you came across about the Plant Postdocs, because in 4 years it actually grew so big. We actually have difficulty to maintain it. We need a huge manpower behind to run this organization. But also at the same time, it was pandemic. So I literally didn't have any friend. I literally didn't have the project to get up and running, except we can go to the field because it's outside. So I spent many hours just by walking by myself and listening audiobooks and the podcast. And that is the time it came to my mind, well, there are many resources out there. I like to listen, but there's not much about, plant biology. There is only one podcast on that time by Liz and Ivan Taproot podcast. So I thought, okay, why don't I start a podcast? And I did it. And right now I'm in the season 3. So if I tell you about my postdoc, what basically happened during the postdoc, I didn't not only learn about the cell biology more in depth and the maze genetics and all sort of stuff. I did 2 additional things, right? Like this Plant Postdocs and No Time to Read podcast. So I connected my training with my networking, and that actually overall helped me to build a portfolio. And right now, I'll not talk much about what I'm doing as a faculty. Again, I'm going through a dip, and I enjoy the dip now as soon as I came to know what a dip means. But I started as an assistant professor at Howard last year, which is basically 7 or 8 months. But as I said, it's not only if I just come and teach and run my lab, I'll be another professor in another department. What I did this year, actually, I started a workshop series that's called Microscopy Monday. So the goal is that I bring expertise from all over the places and bring the students together so everyone can learn. First of all, I can also learn. So these are the things I always want to highlight. So as I walked you through some of these things, you can see that I try to bring my training in every stages, expand the network horizontally, and then that actually comes together to build the portfolio. Now, if you are with me up to this point, you will start thinking, okay, I really like this guy, Arif, or you may say that, oh, I hate this guy. He just talked about himself. But here is the thing. Most often time, we think that, oh, I really like this person's profile, so I want to actually simulate that, right? I want to reach to that point. So where should I start? Where should you start? So first thing I'll say, don't copy anybody, because everyone's experience, everyone's skill set is very, very different. And the idea is that you find your niche area, and then you try to achieve that. If you open another podcast, people will say, oh, you are copying Arif. It's not helpful, right? If you start another Plant Postdocs or something, people say, well, there is already a Plant Postdocs and they're doing very well. Why you're opening another one? So I'll give you a couple of good examples in the community other people are doing. For instance, the Katie is here. You'll learn from her. She's an excellent scientist, but also a great science communicator. There are people I know who use their time lapse as educational material all over the Twitter. There are people who are very good in data visualization. They use it and then expose themselves and be visible with all of their resources they're creating for the community. So I'm going to do one thing. I'll highlight 3 super important resources, which I find a little bit low key, but also which help me, right? Either I work directly with those resources on building phase, or I actually took advantage of that. The first of all, I started a series with the ASPB and the Plant Day, that interview series called the Faculty of Myths and Realities. And I was pretty young. I was a graduate student, and also some part I did when I was a first year postdoc. The idea was that on that time, I was inviting many of the new faculty who got job in last 3 years. And then it was kind of a text format interview series. Here's the QR code you can access. But it's a very light reading. You can go and read and try to understand how their career path went and what are the challenges and all of these things. But it might be fun reading, but you will ask Arif, okay, like I have to really apply. Give me some more substantial. So other thing I found when I first started preparing my documents for the job is like Ross Eber's website. So what basically he did, if you go to his website, I provided the link, you'll find that there is a folder for job application. And there are many successful candidates actually volunteer to put their materials, right? So you know that these people are successful and these are the materials they use. And he's not only for research university, but also for the POI, the government job, and also for the industry job. And so what I literally did, I just download and print it and take it home. So every night after my dinner, I used to keep reading. And one of the things I'll tell, all of these candidates are successful. And if you read their materials, one common criteria you'll find is very easy to understand. It's very accessible. So that actually kind of, like forced me to think, okay, how I can make my science more accessible. That I will get a minute, but I'll give a pitch. So you can mostly think about it's like throwing you to the presidential debate, right? You get to all the difficult questions, but that actually forces you to think about, oh, how I will face this question if I have to actually answer this. But again, I will just take you to the next, the third one and the most important one, I would say. It is actually created by plant postdocs. You might think that if you are just too invested in the plant postdoc, that's what you're saying. I'll say, to be very honest, you can ask anybody, and this is the best resource created in the plant sciences sphere. So what we realized, me, Sunil, and Ari, as a part of the plant postdoc team, that, okay, we do many of these career webinars, but it's all sporadic, everywhere, all over the places. So what we did last semester, last fall, we brought and organized 4 very nice workshop series where we went through, CV, cover letter, diversity statement, teaching statement, research statement, research seminar, and job talk, everything covered. And then if you go to the plant postdoc, it's there, like it's in the website. So you have to just spend 4 hours and you can just see and learn from the expert, right? And then you get all the idea. So these are the 3 places I will say you spend 1 or 2 weeks if you think that, okay, this round I'm going to apply. Just go and start looking at those things. It's not stressful. Just learn the process. And other thing I'll say, because the plant postdoc and other resources actually have many of those things, but I'll just quickly highlight, you basically need 5 documents, right? If you think about, oh, I can go for a job application, like Arif was explaining. You need your CV, I hope you have. You need the cover letter that will be always tailored. But the other 3 things that documents that takes time is research statement. You have to think very, very deeply about your research, right? Not only that you are excited about, but whether the other people, any department you apply, will be excited or not. And then the teaching statement, which I would say when I started applying, because I did my PhD in Japan, I just did a lot of experiments. I had no teaching experience. So I literally went and taught a whole course by myself as a postdoc to fill that gap. DI statement, I'll say, if you send your application package to someone to look at, and if someone got a job in 2018, they are not the right person to look at your DI statement, because this is happening in the last few years. So find someone who got a job, in 2021, 2023, they are the one who actually went to the DI statement. It's very recent in the academic job market. Other thing I'll say, you might start thinking for a year that you are going to apply, but your referees probably don't know, right? Because every time you submit an application, they have to submit a letter for you. So give them enough time, first discuss with them, create a Google Doc. What I used to do, I have a Google Doc. I just go and find out that, okay, who submitted the letter for me for which school and which they didn't. And then in one go, I go and send an email to my boss and then say that, oh, I'm missing the letter in these 2 places, can you send? So you just make things easier for everybody. And one of the other small thing, I'll just note, I'll say, some universities, actually 4 or 5 places out of 20, what I see, they ask you to create a single PDF file with your major 3 or 5 first author articles, right? That is absolutely probably they're looking for. With this, actually, what I'll say that each of these things deserve, long discussion and conversation. That's why actually I pointed out the plant postdoc resources, but it's not that straightforward, right? And many of the things. So while I was going through, 2 rounds of application, I learned a few small things, and I think that is what I'll say is super important. And I'll go through each of the point and I'll explain what I mean by that. So first of all, think about your time. Looking for job is actually a full-time job. That if you think that, oh, I'll prepare these 5 documents and just change the name of the department and submit, you're not going to get any interviews, right? Because it will not reflect that how much you're interested and excited about the department. My suggestion is study the department you apply, like an undergraduate course. What are the people working there? What is the graduate program look like? What kind of funds they get? What kind of paper they publish? What is the greenhouse facility? Each and everything. What is the DI statement? What kind of course they teach for the undergraduate level? After studying that, when you apply, anybody read your application from the department, they will realize this guy know what he is talking about and why he's applying to us. But even after that, you'll find that many rejections. And then most of the time, the people start actually getting it wrong. They think that application outcome is binary. It's either acceptance or rejection. I'll say this is the concept you have to come out of. It is basically a process. The same department who actually rejects you this year, if you just get fed up and you stop communicating with any of them, it's your loss, not their loss. It's the process. Think about this department will hire again. Maybe you will apply again, right? So you need to think it as a process that it's not done, right? It's not only one department. It's not in the not only one time hiring. And many of the times, again, I will quote my mom, she used to tell that if I get in rejection, she said that you're only one person, you need only one job, and one job will be there for you. So I think don't take the rejection personally. And if you can overcome these 2 things, you start considering the job application as a process and don't take the outcome personally, you will be just be in the top 1%. And there is a reason. If you look at any field, it's not fair, but this is the fact. Sports to anywhere, the top 1% people get the 99% resource. If you like it or not, that is the reality. And most of the time, everyone has a PhD, they're expert in the field. The reason they cannot be in the top 1% because they take the decision personally. They don't consider that, oh, there are some people who rejected my postdoc application. Those professors are my very good friend now. I didn't stop communicating with them, right? And the same department who will reject you, they have the possibility to recruit the next round. With this, one of the major things will be to accept the criticism and think it as an opportunity. That if someone even told Arif, we cannot interview you because you don't have a first author publication from your postdoc. And I know it's like a daylight, it's very clear that is missing. But I told him, okay, no problem. I hope I'll get my paper out. And if you have opening next round, I'll apply, right? And one of the other things is that the moment people see that there is a rejection, they just say, another rejection. But what I'll say is start with your rejection. What will happen if someone rejects me? I immediately reach out to the search committee member. I said, oh, I got rejection, but I'm really interested in your position. Do you have any feedback? Most of the time they'll say, Arif, okay, let's talk over Zoom. And they will go through my application and they will change, my application tremendously because they saw 200 applications, right? They know what is good thing, what is bad thing. And one of the other thing I'll say, let's say you start applying in September, October, November, and you start getting all the rejection, December, January, February. By the time you get, let's say you get all the rejections in the world where you applied, don't worry, because there is another application round coming. You have the summer to improve all of these things. You can talk with the people, improve, make sure your application package is better than last year and go. So there is always a second round of application on the corner. So I want to end here with the note of optimism that don't take rejection very seriously, because that is what happened when you start applying for the first time. Remember, there is so many talented people. The problem is not your talent. The problem is there is less job. So don't put it on yourself. Thank you so much if anyone is listening and with me till now.
Thank you, Dr. Ashraf. That was a wonderful talk. I believe there are so many takeaways from your talk. So now we will move on to our next speaker, Dr. Katie Murphy. So she is the director of phenotyping and principal investigator at Donald Danforth Plant Science Center. a nonprofit research institute in St. Louis, Missouri. Her research group is focused on deploying high-throughput phenotyping technologies and applying open source image analysis tools to understand how plants respond to stressful environmental conditions. She holds a PhD in plant biology from UC Davis and a bachelor's degree in chemistry from Stanford University. She previously interned for TechExcel, an agricultural investment and development firm. Katie's goal is to make a secure, sustainable food supply that can withstand future climates. Katie is an avid science communicator and shares her research on TikTok at Real Time Science. With that, so Katie, so you can just you have shared your screen and then it's all yours now.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thanks to Manwinder, Jason, and Tu for inviting me here today. Arif, you're a hard act to follow, but I'm going to try my best. But I think we're going to provide some balance here into different insights. I was taking notes while you were talking, so thanks for all the great information. I thought a lot about what I wanted to share with you all today. The maize community is like fundamental to my work and who I am, so I'm excited to chat with you all. And I decided to title this Finding a Fulfilling Career in Academia, because I think that's something that I was always searching for, was a career that I could feel fulfilled, what was really going to make me happy. Oh, hang on. There we go. Okay, so a little bit of background on me and how I got here. We're then going to delve into my concrete tips that I hope you all can take away before I tell you about the job that I do today, because it's a little bit unusual. So like Manwinder said, I got my bachelor's degree in chemistry in 2015. I was a chemistry major because I thought I wanted to go into drug development and save lives that way. I loved organic chemistry. And then I met this woman, Ginny Walbett, who said, I'll teach you everything you need to know about corn. And I never looked back. So corn has been really important to me. I just fell in love with plant science and plant biochemistry in particular. So I decided to go do a PhD at UC Davis, where I worked on maize again and specialized metabolites in maize. We're going to talk about my adventure as an intern at TechExcel in this talk as well. And then in 2020, I graduated and came out here to St. Louis, Missouri, where I was a postdoc with Malia Guillen and Doug Allen. Was in the postdoc for about 1.5 years when a position opened up to be director of phenotyping and a principal investigator. I applied thinking I was not going to get the job and find myself very fortunate, got really lucky to be sitting here today. So I thought, what are the takeaways? I've been to a lot of different career panels over time, and I wanted to give you some really constructive things that I think you can do, specifically whether you're in any sort of schooling, undergraduate, graduate degree, or if you're a postdoc, thinking about what to do next. So the first thing that I did was I took a leadership course when I was in graduate school. So this was offered by the university. I think we met for 2 different Saturdays and then maybe 5 one-hour lunch meetings. So it wasn't an enormous time commitment. But at the time, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my career. One of my fellow lab mates had done this program. It was free. I said, okay, I'm going to apply and sign up. And they took graduate students and postdocs from all across the university. And here were the most important things that I took away from that course. I guess the first is you should take one of these courses. I know they sound maybe a little bit silly, but they are so critical to develop all the skills you need no matter your career. So the first thing I learned was that soft skills can be learned. And I think this is a really common misconception. People think that being an introvert or an extrovert is something that is just within you and it determines how you're going to interact with people and determines your soft skills. And that is not true. People think it's crazy, but I am an introvert. And if you meet me, you'll say, no, you're not. And that's because I have learned how to enjoy talking with people, to talk with them about their research and their careers. So this is something that you can also learn. You could learn how to be a great communicator. Again, networking is not just for extroverts. There's ways to learn how to network. There's really unique ways to network we're going to talk about in another slide. That's critical for whatever career you're going to go into. And then lastly, if you were to ask, and we did this as part of this course, employers, be that academia, industry, people looking for postdocs, what's the #1 critical skill? And it's someone who works well with others. Like Arif said, there are so many excellent scientists out there, and there's not a lot of positions. And when I'm hiring people to work in my lab now, I look for someone who's going to work well with the team. Doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be friends, and they may be very different people, but I can train anybody to do almost anything as long as they're willing to learn and to work hard with others and collaborate and cooperate. So learning these soft skills, being able to show employers that you have these soft skills is totally critical. I think all of this ends up being a bit of a snowball effect. Because I took this leadership course, they told me this is why I got my internship. My internship, which you're going to see in a second, is why I moved back to St. Louis and how I got my postdoc. So things can sort of spiral once you start taking advantage of these opportunities. Okay, next big tip is learn how to present your research. As I was introduced, science communication is really important to me. I don't care what form of science communication you take, do what's best for you, but it's really critical to being able to share the work that you do, because anytime you go in for any interview, you're going to share the work that you do, and your work may be more important, maybe cooler or more critical than the other person you're competing against. But if you can't explain it to people in a way that makes sense, they will not offer you the job, right? You need to be able to explain it. So when I was in graduate school, I learned how to talk about my research doing what's called the grad slam, also known as 3-minute thesis. I will be honest with you, I did it because I wanted this giant check, because that was going to pay a lot of rent. So that's why I started doing this. And I said, I really want to do this. So I learned how to do this. I watched a lot of YouTube videos, watched a lot of TED Talks, and I practiced like crazy to get good at presenting my research. Now, science communication may mean something very different to you. Maybe you're an artist and want to communicate via art, maybe poetry, maybe this is something you're doing online, maybe it's presentations. It doesn't really matter what it is, find what's good for you. Again, like Arif said, we're all different. This was one of my mechanisms, but communication is totally critical. So as a postdoc, I actually started a science communication project on TikTok. This was at the suggestion of my postdoc advisor, Malia Guillen, and that became a really excellent way to sort of share my research, do outreach to kids and adults. Again, sort of snowballed because people started getting excited about my research because of the TikTok. So they would invite me to give other talks, or they would write articles about me in the newspaper. And that really sort of gained me a reputation and helped build up my research because I got good at communicating it. All right, next tip is informational interviews, because I did not know what this was. So I wanted to explain it to all of you if you have never heard of an informational interview. But this is where you are actually sort of interviewing somebody else about what their job is, their day-to-day, their career. They are casual. I did a lot of these in graduate school because I was required to for that leadership program. And I've sort of taken what I learned from those and continued that through my career. So really you write to someone on LinkedIn or someone you might meet in an event like the Maze meeting, and you say, hey, can I meet with you for 30 minutes and just learn more about your career? I'm looking into what options might be available for me and how to develop that. And so the 3 top questions that I would ask in that informational interview is, what is a normal day like at work? Try to understand what these folks' jobs are, whether that's in academia, people who are professors. You're going to learn a lot because there's a lot of stuff they do that you don't see. How do I get from here to your position? So again, these sort of skills that we're telling you about today are going to be different for everyone, and people are going to have different options and opinions. People who work in industry are going to tell you something slightly different than what we're telling you. And then lastly, this is a good tip. A polite way to learn about money is to ask, what's the salary range for a position like yours? So you don't have to outright ask someone, how much money do you make? I know that feels very awkward. I don't like to do that. But money is important, and we often don't talk about it. And so it's helpful to be able to know, what does someone make? If you are at a public university, you can look up people's salaries. I recommend doing that. At nonprofits, you can Google the nonprofit, and they're required to report, I think, the top 10 earners at that nonprofit, so you can see their salaries. But it's something that is important, and you should think about how money matters to you and in what ways. And this is a polite way to ask that question. Lastly, you're going to hear a lot about networking from, I'm sure, all of us, as well as our host at the end. But really where I learned the most about networking was when I was an intern at TechExcel. So this is an investment and development firm. They're actually located in Kansas City. And when I was a graduate student, there was a program at UC Davis that you could apply to that would basically give you this internship. I'll tell you, the reason they gave me the internship was because I did that leadership program, so I could show them, hey, I have some skills that you might need. And so I came and spent 3 months in St. Louis, Missouri. At the time, TechExcel was renting office space out of the Danforth Center where I now work. And that was how I built my network. So networking is not just going to an event and talking to someone, it's getting to know people at different jobs, different skill levels. And I really started to get to know different folks. I learned a lot about myself. I loved working for TechExcel. I love being an intern, but I found that I was not completely fulfilled, at least at that point in my career, to want to do it full time right when I graduated. But I did meet some really wonderful people, and that network enabled me to meet my postdoc advisors. So when I was 6 months before I graduated my PhD, called them up and said, hey, I really enjoyed meeting you last summer. I want to work for you. Can we find some funding to make that possible? And it worked out. So your network is how you get a job. These are the people that you meet and are going to help you along the way and see your application and say, yes, I want to talk with you. Let's see what we can make happen. And then something that I was never taught, but I sort of did on my own, is get to know yourself in order to find a career that fits for you. So maybe this is journaling. I don't journal, but I really have spent a couple times every couple years in my career when I felt either confused or not sure where I was going or what I was going to do. And I sat down and really listed out, what are my priorities? Maybe that's a place you want to live. Maybe that's a target job you want to go for. Maybe that's whether you like wet lab work or managing people. What do you find fun in your PhD or in your postdoc? What do you enjoy doing? And what are you good at? So what are sort of your skills? This is also going to help you find the areas that you're not so good. When you look at your resume, where are the gaps and where are things that you think, okay, I actually need to target this and do an activity that's going to help me improve on these certain skills. And I think that's a way to help you figure out what is going to be a really fulfilling career. So I was sort of doing this in my head and figuring out, what do I want to do after I love my postdoc? And I really wanted to stay at the Danforth Center. So that's sort of how I ended up where I am. I'm going to tell you about how I got there now, but I wanted to introduce, if you have not been to visit us, I hope that you come. We are a nonprofit research institute. We are the largest plant science nonprofit in the world, and we're located in St. Louis, Missouri. So if you come to the Mays meeting this March 2025, I hope that you'll come and visit us as well. Our main building is the orange one here, located just outside of the city of St. Louis. We've got a lot of greenhouses, and in the back we have two buildings. One on the left is the Bridge building, where there's a lot of startups, and the community college has some lab and classroom space. And on the right is the Benson Hill building, which was originally a startup that was spun out of the Danforth Center and is now a growing company. What do we do at the Danforth Center? How are we different than universities, because we are still academic? Well, we have a mission that I think everyone on this call shares. We want to improve the human condition through plant science. Makes a lot of sense. We have 400 total employees. About 300 of those are scientists. We represent this year at least 30 different home countries for the people who work here. We have 31 different scientific teams. I now lead one of those teams. And we also try to launch startups out of the Danforth Center. We're a nonprofit, so once a company becomes a company, they no longer are part of the Danforth Center, because our goal is not to make a profit, and a company's is. But we do that in order to get the research out to the people, out to farmers, and out to people who need it, not just keep it inside of the nonprofit where we can't see seeds and products grow and move into other things. So this mission really resonated with me, and I thought I'd tell you a little bit of what I think makes us different. We're smaller than a university. Obviously, we're one big building, 400 employees, and our mission's a little bit different. You saw on that last slide, our mission's to advance the human condition through plant science, but our mission is not education. Now, it doesn't mean we don't do that. We have undergraduates here every summer. We have graduate students who do their PhD at nearby universities and do their research with us here at the Danforth Center. But our number one mission is not education like it is at a university. We have less bureaucracy because we're smaller. There's not so many people. We don't have layers and layers of deans and other folks that you have often at a large university. And I think our culture is unique because of our smaller size and because we're not a university. It makes it really different. I love the atmosphere here. We work very hard, but we really respect boundaries and people's time and those sorts of things, because we're, again, not a university. And then people often ask me, okay, but what is a core director? They don't really understand what a core director does. So we have 6 core facilities here at the Danforth Center. This is a place where we bring together a lot of resources that don't really make sense to be in any one individual lab. So imagine you are running a lab and there's a $3 million piece of equipment that you need to use for 1 week of the year, and takes 2 experts in order to run that equipment. it doesn't really make sense for it to be in your lab if you only need it for 1 week of the year and have to hire 2 employees for many years on end. So instead, we take some of those resources and as well as the expertise and put them in a core facility that everyone at the Danforth Center can use rather than have them with just one research team. We have external users as well. So I often tell people I'm kind of like running a small business because both our internal and our external users pay to use our facilities. That's how we recover costs. So people write into their grant that they're going to use the facility and use our team members' time, and then we recover costs that way. We also do research in our core facility. So we do a lot of service for others in that they contract us to do their research projects or they rent equipment from us. But we're also actively trying to push the frontier of plant science and plant phenotyping, developing new tools, new analysis techniques. Most of my research is centered around corn because obviously it's the best plant ever. I don't think I need to convince people on this call of that. So I work with a lot of users. I still write grants, apply for grants, excuse me, write papers. So in many ways, it's like if I were reading a true and tried research team, but we do a little bit less research, more collaborative service for others. And I'm not tenure track. So I'm not on 5-year contracts, which is how the members here at the Danforth Center are who are leading, excuse me, a typical research team. I'm just on a rolling basis doing this job. People ask me what's my favorite part of my job, and I like to show them this picture. This is our new farm that was purchased by the Danforth Center, and I love driving the gator around. Obviously, there's many things. I really love my job. This is really a dream job for me, but I love driving this gator around, so that's probably the best part. Okay, before I finish off with the slides, I want to give you my hot take that I wish someone had told me, or people started to tell me. My fiance told me this many years ago, which is that science cannot love you back. So this is a picture of me and my family. We went to the eclipse recently, but I think it's changing, but there used to be this culture in science, including plant science, that you needed to move around all the time for different positions and that your career needed to be your number one most important thing, that you need to be there all hours, all the time. I personally don't believe in that. I think you decide where you live and how you spend your time. And I absolutely love doing science. If you haven't noticed, I love my job. I really, really love it. But it's important to recognize what else in your life is important to you. Maybe that's your family or your hobbies, and that's going to change where you want to live and what you want to do with your time and your free time. So I say that to hopefully free some of you from that. I felt a lot of guilt for not wanting to move across the country for my PhD or move across the world. And it's okay if you do want to do that, but it's also okay if you don't. So key takeaways are learn your soft skills. They are learnable, just like playing a piano, you can do it. Do informational interviews, build your network, and get to know yourself to figure out what you want to do and what your priorities are. And I'm just going to finish with a thank you slide to show you my team here. I really love working with these folks. I feel very fortunate to have an awesome team doing great science. And then my mentors along the way. None of this is possible with a lot of luck and a lot of really great people who have guided me and helped teach me so many things. So you can see this is Ginny, my undergraduate advisor on the bottom left. Philip was my PhD advisor. Malia and Doug were my postdoc advisors. I was co-advised. And then Noah Falgren is here. He's also a core director here at the Danforth Center, but has really helped me as I've developed my career. So with that, I'm going to end and pass it off to our last speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. So it was a wonderful talk. Yeah, so there was so many things to learn from your talk. So with that, we'll move on to our next speaker, Dr. Nicholas Gladman. So he graduated with a bachelor's in molecular biology and biochemistry, and then got his PhD in genetics from University of Wisconsin-Madison. His graduate school work was focused on Rhabdopsis thaliana as a model. Then he decided to pivot to a crop system for his postdoctoral work with the USDA department with Dr. Zhengao Zin. During that time, he shifted his focus to genetics and genomics of sorghum and got a postdoctoral appointment at Cold Spring Harbor Labs with Dr. Doreen Weir in 2017. In 2022, he rejoined the USDA as a permanent scientist and is currently working on the genetics, genomics, and molecular biology of sorghum. He also works with Dr. Doreen Weir and her team on creating and improving the Grameen plant genomic databases, including Grameen plants, Grameen maize, and sorghum base. This partnership also allows him to perform outreach to various crop communities and work towards building more standards and resources that can benefit multiple plant stakeholder communities. And with that, Dr. Gladman, so you can start your presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm really happy to be here to talk today. I want to say from the start, one, I'm glad that Arif and Katie went first, and two, we did not coordinate at all on any of these slides, which is a good thing because I'm basically going to tell you the exact same thing they did. There's a lot of overlap, I think, in terms of success and how we can, really grow and be successful as scientists. But just to sort of reiterate, yeah, so I really started early on in my career doing my PhD in the University of Wisconsin-Madison, working on Arabidopsis. I was really more of a biochemist and molecular biologist. I was there for a pretty long PhD. And then I decided I wanted to work on crops. And one of the reasons for that is I wanted just to do something a little bit more applied. I thought I'd have a better chance at honestly getting a job if I shifted to crops. And so I applied to many, many positions, both in and outside of the USDA. And I took the job that gave me the job, which was actually down in Lubbock, Texas. And that's where I started working with sorghum for the first time. I actually didn't know what sorghum looked like until I was driving in Lubbock, Texas from the airport to try to find an apartment building. I had never seen the crop before. And then from there, I was there for about a year and a half, and I went on and then shifted up to Cold Spring Harbor, where I've been ever since. And then, yes, about 2 years ago, I rejoined the USDA, and I've been very happy since then. But I think you can draw a parallel between Arif and Katie and myself's kind of path is that it's sort of long and winding. And over the time, you really do expand out different expertises and kind of focuses that we have. And generally, I think that often benefits us. So in my case, I shifted from Arabidopsis molecular biology to a little bit more physiology and molecular biology and genetics of sorghum. And then really ever since the pandemic, and partly because of the pandemic, I've shifted more towards sort of a bioinformatic and genomics focus. And overall, I think having that sort of breadth and to an extent depth has really allowed me to finally get the position that I have now, and which I'm very happy about. And just to give you a little bit of an idea about the Agricultural Research Service, which is the sort of official research branch of the Department of Agriculture, since maybe you are not as familiar with it. They do have postdoctoral positions, which some of you might not know about. They are pretty nice. They're pretty well paid. They are term limited, which is kind of unique to them. They have a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 4 years for that. For the permanent scientist positions, they are permanent. You actually get permanent funding along with that to some extent, but you can still get extramural funding. For me, my task was for the job that I applied for is really to work on sorghum. And while maize absolutely is a wonderful, wonderful crop, for me, I'm a little biased, but it's not maybe the favorite crop and the best crop in the world, despite what Katie says. But I think it's still really wonderful. And my whole onus is really to, improve sorghum through genetics, genomics, and molecular biology in any way I can. But I can still work on any different kinds of crops as long as it's sort of keeping in line with the fact that that is my mission in terms of the USDA ARS. And despite the fact that I've done a lot more bioinformatics lately, I still get to manage fields. I still get to go outside in the summer. I don't get to ride a gator, unfortunately, but I still get to go out there and get dirt between my fingers, and it's really wonderful. And as a part of that, I get to work with and manage a lot of really awesome and wonderful people, and that in itself is a way that I've been able to grow as well. And ultimately, again, the responsibilities for us are based on kind of what kind of permanent funding that you get from the USDA in some cases, and for us that's growing genomic databases. It's also conducting experimental research regarding sorghum, specifically nutrient use efficiency and inflorescence architecture. That's sort of what our group does. But a really big and important thing, and I think this hits on to what the previous 2 people talked about, is we have to communicate with our stakeholders. And in our case, our stakeholders are other sorghum researchers or other people who work in maize for our green maize database, any other of our stakeholders, as well, any other researchers as well, but it can also be seed companies, it can also be sorghum breeders. So it can be anyone who finds value in these particular genetic databases, but it's also the granting agencies on top of that. And so one of the other responsibilities that I have as an ARS scientist, which many people may not know, is I have to be on 2 papers every single year. I don't have to publish 2 papers every single year, but I have to submit 2 every single year. So early on in your career, that can be a little bit of a strain, but over time, it becomes much easier to do as you kind of grow and build out your program. And ultimately, for myself, I also feel that there's sort of a mentorship responsibility I have towards the early career scientists. And this is also reflected in the fact that the ARS has a really strong mentorship program for people like me who are still somewhat early on in their career as well. And it's a really nice position. And what I will say, just hype it up a little bit is, if you're not familiar with the ARS, again, just to get a little bit more background on it, it has a really nice work-life balance. You can kind of decide to push as hard or as not as hard as you want and grow in that way. Funding, there is, a decent amount of stable funding that is fairly permanent. But again, you can go out and get extramural grants if you want to, through NEFA, through NSF. You have a built-in collaborative network, and part of that is due to the fact that we have this sort of research constraint about getting out 2 papers every year. But a lot of the people in the USDA are just highly collaborative, and it's really wonderful. And by the nature of where all of these research stations are throughout the country, because there are a lot of diverse locations as well as research topics, you sort of have built-in collaborative networks with nearby land-grant universities, often which these ARS stations are affiliated. So it makes a really nice way to build up a lot of great networking in a lot of different places. And there's also kind of just great benefits overall. You also, as a kind of a tie-in, one of the nice things about the government is you know exactly what you're paid and you know exactly what everyone else is paid. So you don't need to try to broach the topic of what your salary range is. It's all public. You can look up, see how much I make if you want. So it makes sort of this whole, it removes some barriers in terms of trying to apply for jobs and ask certain questions, because it's much more straightforward because it has to be legally. Some of the cons is, though, again, the stringent productivity requirements. Unlike Danforth, we have a bit more bureaucracy in the federal government. Some of it is fine, some of it I could do without, but it's just the nature of the game. There are also location-specific issues sometimes. Every research station is its own little fiefdom in a way. And, it's like any department that you would apply to or be working with, in academia or in a nonprofit section. You're going to get local politics. You're going to get people that might make your department or your floor that you're researching on like really wonderful and really nice, or they can make your day-to-day stuff a little bit less pleasant. And so that's just sort of the heterogeneous nature of working in a very large institution. And one of the cons is it's also, you do get very diverse research locations. Sometimes the things that you might be best suited to work on aren't necessarily in a place that is, you would prefer to live. Sometimes there's, research stations that are in, Salinas, California, Charlotte, North Carolina, Ithaca, New York. But then there's some places, that maybe people don't, a little bit more further removed from, big cities or nearby airports. And, that can be something that you have to balance if this is like the path that you really want to take. So it is a bit more constrained with that. And ultimately, if any of you have been paying attention to the news, you're sort of at the whim of the government. So if Congress shuts down, the government shuts down, you shut down with it. And that can really be kind of a constraint. But so that's just kind of a primer on USDA and the ARS in general, but I want to talk about giving some general career advice about growing sustainably. And again, you're going to probably hear some very similar notes about what you heard from Katie and Arif. But for me, growing sustainably is having a satisfying career and then also having a good work-life balance. And one of the things that's important to remember is what is a good work-life balance for me might be different from yours. Some people, they want to work a lot and they want to, that is like their whole thing and that makes them happy. Some people, they want to have time where they spend it with their family or at home or just doing the things they like. And that's all good. But it's important that you understand like what you want out of it and get that out of yourself. And the USD, I think, actually offers that ability quite nicely. And ultimately, to build that up, to have this nice sort of foundational root system to be able to grow sustainably is you need to have a foundation, foundational skill sets, and as Katie talked about, understanding of self. And I think that really gets to how you can be a very successful and happy person as you go forward, whether it's in academia, nonprofits, industry, or government. And I think, again, you're going to hear some similar things now, but one of the things I want to emphasize is you really need to know your weaknesses. For me, when I started off in grad school, I was a very poor scientific writer, as an example. And over time, when I ended up graduating, that was probably one of my best strengths. So over time, it's easier in some cases to build up the thing that you might have, you might be somewhat deficient in, and make that your strength. But it's also something to know about where you think it might be worthwhile to bring in a collaborator, to build a relationship with a provider that can do that work for you, if it is a research focused kind of thing, and help strengthen your program in that way. So knowing where, and where you can build up your own weaknesses versus where it's okay to ask for help and do that, I think really helps to maximize your output and also just relieve some stress on your own part. The one thing I will say, and again, emphasizing what's already been said, is being a good communicator will send you very, very far. in science, I think. And it also is something that is very difficult to become good at sometimes, but it is a skill that can be learned. Anyone who you see who is like a fantastic, writer, or, they give the best presentations, they weren't born like that. They had to do a lot of practice still. And, there are ways to do that, whether it's through seminars, Toastmasters, whatever, but being able to communicate in a variety of ways to a variety of different audiences will make you, one, I think, generally kind of more happy as a scientist, but two, will make you more successful, because then you know how you can tailor what kind of scientific story you're telling to, a technical manuscript, or to a grant panel, or even if you're just doing a general outreach, to the public, how you can describe really complex scientific ideas digestibly at the necessary level will make it so that you can really thrive. And again, it is something that you can work on and become better at, but sometimes this does require a lot of work. And ultimately, I think being a good communicator will help you become a much more successful person in terms of your own time management, as well as managing other people within your group, or even if they're your coworkers, because being able to effectively communicate, what is needed, or kind of what the priorities are for a project, allows people to understand, how to get things done quicker. And it's also being able to interact and understand how certain people, might best work, and how flexible or inflexible that you might have to be given a circumstance. And so again, these are a lot of soft skills I'm talking about here, and they might be very difficult and maybe not something that you're overly familiar with, but I do want to emphasize these are things that you can get better at. And these are things that you should really start to think about, right now, if you feel that they might be a weakness. And the last thing that I want to say on terms of like building solid roots is, do not let imposter syndrome conquer you. I mean, all of you are very talented scientists. You all bring a lot to the table, even if you don't think you do. And one of the things that Katie said is she was applied to a job that I think, she didn't think she would ever get, I think is one of the things you said. I've known people who did not want to apply to a job because they didn't think they were good enough. And meanwhile, these people had better CVs than I did at the time when I had a job. So do not, it's sort of the sports analogy is you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Do not handicap yourself when you go out there. Let, the admissions committee, let the recruitment committee, let the hiring board, make those decisions for you. Don't remove yourself of that chance, because then your name also gets out there in that process, and you start to build that network slowly by just getting your name across people's desks. That is one way to actually do it. And in the concept of finding a career, again, I want to emphasize this is, when you are, this has already been said, but when you're going in for a job, you are evaluating them as well. You need to know is this job right for me? Am I going to be happy in this job? Does it, fulfill me, professionally, as well as satisfy my needs personally in order to do it? And when you're evaluating whether it's an academic job or a job with USDA or at Colesburn Harbor or Danforth Center, it's like you need to sit down and think about what that is. And when you're having these interviews with those admissions committees or recruitment office, you need to ask those kind of questions that Katie talked about, because you are interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you right now. And that's also kind of getting the mindset of, don't let imposter syndrome conquer you. You are good enough for this. You deserve this kind of feedback and positioning in life because you've worked really hard for it. And ultimately, one thing I will say is, flexibility does improve your odds. And this is kind of getting to a point where, how much flex, do you want to be able to move anywhere in the country and take a job because you just need a job? And I, it's not easy sometimes, and it's something that not everyone can do. For me, when I was applying for postdoc positions, I think I applied to 12 different jobs in like 10 different states because I was able to at the time. I wasn't geographically constrained. Not everyone can do that, but it does help if you're able to move around and able to do that, is one honest truth to say. And the next three things that I'm going to talk about really do kind of get to the mentality of finding a job and the job process. And sometimes it is a feast or famine job market. Sometimes hiring, is easier, sometimes it's not. And it's important to know, and this is something that Arif was talking about, is, you're going to fail, and that's fine. I've not gotten more jobs than I've ever gotten in terms of the job application process. That's just how it works. But you need to realize that this is not a failure. This is something that you can grow from and become even stronger for. And this is kind of gets to the point of, asking for feedback, getting stronger. There are plenty of good resources out there, like the Jeff Rossibara's, wonderful GitHub resource. Use those kinds of things and grow from it. And it's going to make you a better scientist and, general kind of person all around. I personally believe that. And the other thing to that point is people like to be asked for their advice. You can reach out to the department and see, if and understand how to build up collaborations with the people there if you're looking for an academic research situation, or the research leader at a research station for the ARS. You can reach out and make these connections and understand, one, is this going to be a good fit for you, but two, it helps the people at those locations to understand that you are invested in what they want to do. And also, how you can build up, make nice collaborations, make everyone in there, a better and stronger kind of department or research group. And ultimately, one thing to keep in mind is, and again, this is sort of a mindset, is there's always going to be luck and bias in this process and in society. I admit that I've probably had more good luck than I have bad luck, in my scientific career, but there's been some ups and downs on top of that. And, I've probably benefited from some of them. But it's important to note that you can also still identify places that you want to go and might not be have certain biases against you by interacting and building a network and becoming more well informed about places. And that also helps you, frankly, become a little bit more lucky when you kind of build these types of networks as well. And again, I'm not saying this is good or bad. I'm just saying that it's important to keep in mind that this is the reality of kind of the world we dig in, and live in, and having that mindset makes you a little bit more resilient. And for me, when I've been growing in career, when I've gotten advice from, much more successful scientists, when I've, been able to have some success right now, these are the things that I've been keeping in mind is you are working for your stakeholders. If you're at a, primary undergraduate institution, your stakeholders are the students. You need to make sure that you educate them and that they are getting a good education and satisfying time in your lectures. If you're, running a research group, you need to make sure, maybe it's the NSF, maybe it's the NIH, maybe it's NIFA, that are your stakeholders. That's the granting agencies. For us, it's a combination of, the ARS and granting offices, as well as, sorghum researchers in terms of the databases we make. We need to understand who benefits from our research and how we can make them happy and satisfied. And that's a way to, tangibly sort of understand what are the ways that you can be successful as a scientist in this career. And as a part of that, collaborations are key. This kind of gets back to, building strength on top of where weaknesses might be, but science is getting more complicated and the stories are getting much more robust. And the ways to build up nice, deep, robust stories are having really strong collaborations with a lot of different people. And I would, that kind of gets into the networking aspect of it too, but you can still really start to build that up even within your own university and your own department in many cases. As a part of that, you always need to keep up with, new techniques, of course. And on top of all that is, when we're talking about soft skills is, try not to be a jerk. Hopefully you're not being performatively nice to people just to get on their good sides. But there is a way when you're dealing with people, to do it respectfully, do professionally, and not do it in a way that, makes sure you cuts the legs out of someone, underneath the legs of someone that you don't really need to do. And it's important to understand that there can be enough resources and growth for everyone, because when you help others to grow, it really does benefit almost everybody. And that's a good way to, I think that's a better kind of healthier mentality to have when you're trying to grow in your career. And the one last, maybe more tangible thing I'll state is that for me, I found out that perfect is the enemy of the good. And that is that I probably would have been way more productive in the last 4 or 5 years if I wasn't trying to make a story, 99% to my satisfaction. And just getting out a good high quality story, a little bit earlier, because for me, getting a good quality story, to 90% completion, where I would be satisfied with the manuscript, took a long time, might take a year or two, but then getting that last, 5 to 9% of that story complete to where I really wanted it to make it awesome, that took the same amount of time as the first 90%. And so, especially in the ARS and the USDA, we do have productivity requirements. It's understanding sort of what your threshold is for quality versus what your threshold is for making sure that you're getting out the product that satisfies your stakeholders properly in some way. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. And kind of tie it all together, success is multidisciplinary. Learning to say no is one of the absolute hardest things you're going to have to do. Early career researchers are often, put upon to be on committees, to serve on panels, to do all these things because they're thought of as having more time, and often they are. And sometimes those are good things because you can help build network success, but at some point you're going to become oversubscribed and you're not going to be able to do anything because you are trying to do too many things at once. And so knowing yourself and knowing what those limits are and eventually having to say no is something that, to be successful, you're going to have to be able to do. In the same way, it's knowing when to pause, negotiate, or even walk away, not just from a job interview or not just from, maybe even a research project, but also the people that you deal with. is a very hard thing. So it's sort of these soft skills of management and building up, research relationships is very difficult. And sometimes these hard parts have to happen. And it's understanding, knowing ahead of time, what you might do in those situations is going to make it easier when that time comes, because that time is going to come. And kind of one final thing is, you're never too busy to ask for or give help to someone who genuinely needs it. I mean, I think that's why, we're all here today. We want to help out. We want to give some advice that we feel might benefit people. And that's the same for, the people down the hall that you might work with. If they're having a rough time with something specifically, offer your help, or always be there. And I think, make some time for when somebody comes and asks you, because again, it really helps everyone else out. And that's my firm belief. And kind of last thing, I think we got some great, more hard specific suggestions about how to build your network. But, start with me. Start just connecting with people that you see on this call right here. Email me. I'm willing to talk to any of you who have questions about the ARS or anything in general. And part of this is being open and willing to share what we have. And with that, I'll say thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Nick. Amazing talk, and it's been really great to see everybody's journeys and kind of think about the connections between them. Now we're going to hear from Karen, who is actually an expert in connecting these stories. She's done a great job doing this. This is for the third time we had this workshop, and I'm really looking forward to it. So Karen Menzel is a graduate lecturer at Iowa State University, where she teaches 4 graduate courses and preparing future faculty. Since 2002, she's prepared more than 1,000 PhDs for the academic job market. She's also ISU's campus co-leader for the Center for the Integration of Research, Training, Teaching, and Learning, an international network of 43 universities supporting future faculty. Karen's academic discipline is creative writing, and she's an active science fiction and fantasy novelist, poet, and editor. And from today, I learned also a Christmas tree farmer and rides a gator. So anyways, I'm excited to hear from Karen. And after the session, we'll have a Q&A. So if anybody has questions, put in the chat and we'll get to discussion after. So go ahead, Karen.
Wow, you made it sound like I'm a lot more busy than I actually feel. It sounds strange, but those things really can all happen in the same life. And I love it. So here we go. Let's talk about learning how to love our lives and building a life that we love. Thank you to the other presenters. Wow. Wow. We learned so much today. Oh my gosh. So I'm going to try and encapsulate some of this in a way that you can absorb, because as we know from your work with plants, you can only absorb so much at a time into one single organism. So again, my name is Karen Menzel, and the main reason I'm here is because I already like you. There are people like me at every institution. Our jobs are to like you and to take care of you and to help you go to your next step. And if you aren't coming to see us and learn what we want to do to help you, that you're missing out on opportunities. So we already heard other presenters talk about finding professional development at the place you are. So think about, there's somebody sitting in an office somewhere who just can't wait for you to walk in and will celebrate you the moment you're there. You want to learn about public speaking? Yay! Okay, here we go. So talking about the dip, I love that Arif included this, because your mentor can talk about working through setbacks and stuff, but when a setback is actually happening, you feel so alone. So it's a really good reminder that our efforts don't always produce results, and that we need to consider deeply before we quit a certain area of inquiry. Arif was talking about grit and sticking to it until that chart that he showed, the chart that this little person is walking on right now, comes and makes these big results happen. But I also love that the dip subtitle here says, teaches you when to quit. We do need to have grit and stick to it until results happen, but also consider deeply, you might need to quit a job or some work that you're doing. Arif also touched on networking. Every place you are, you will be meeting people and nurturing those relationships with other people. In today's world of instant communication, right, our networks are both global and enduring. Your contacts around the world, Japan, Canada, Europe, all the places that we've heard our speakers have gone to, right? These will lead to future jobs, future networks, future connections, and keep your life rich and flexible at the same time, right? Hang on to those people that you meet that are just wonderful people that you're like, I want to keep these people. Arif also touched on pandemic setbacks. The pandemic has affected us all, right? These are global setbacks. So when some of you are looking back at your life during the pandemic and things you didn't learn and things you didn't get to do and places you didn't get to know, you're not really necessarily behind everybody else because we all went through that time together and were affected, which is a, you know, hour-long presentation in and of itself. Arif reminded us about the academic job. You might, in fact, encounter the dip when you begin your academic job. It is stressful to move across the country. It is stressful to learn about a new institution, to learn about your new job, to get your family settled if you have a family, to integrate with the community and force yourself to go make new friends. Like, if you're starting an academic position, you also need to learn how to teach if you've never taught before or haven't built your teaching skills. Getting ready to teach, setting up your lab, hiring your graduate assistants, you might encounter this dip right as soon as you begin. So some advice that I have heard is to, if you can, save some research to be published during your first year instead of before you start, might be a good idea if that is possible in your field and in your area, so that you have something sort of built up that you can publish during that first year while you're getting settled. I'm not sure if that works for maize genetics. Also, Arif reminded us that our individual talents are valuable. People have told you this your whole life. It doesn't mean you believe it. Your strengths, your skills are valuable, really valuable assets to your future teams. All the people that we heard talk today were once in your shoes. Don't allow imposter syndrome and low self-esteem devalue what you have to offer. If you're an introvert, that's great. If you're an extrovert, that's also great. Remember, everybody feels this self-doubt sometimes, and everybody feels like they are less than everyone else sometimes. Don't let it hold you back from making new friends or applying for jobs. Research success. Look at those cool resources that Dr. Ashraf shared to encourage and train yourself. Throughout the conversations we've been having today, we've been hearing about seeking out ways to train yourself. I love that what Dr. Ashraf showed is about successful connections. I know a plant biologist one time shared with me a successful job applications database where these plant biologists have been putting in what their successful applications are that they sent out. So you can look at cover letter examples and of these other documents. So never stop learning. And as I kicked off our presentation today, assume you are both welcomed and valued. Assume that the professional developers would love to have you there. Assume that your new team is super nervous and excited to meet you and want to make a good impression, right? Assume that this new group of friends that you just walked into, like a local board game club or a local knitting club or dance lessons, assume that you are both welcomed and valued until they prove you different. Oh, that's just a repeat. Also, Arif did tell us, know the institution you're applying to, and we heard that echoed from our other presenters. read the mission statement of the place you're applying to so you understand their facilities, the people who are there, your personal fit to the job, and alter your job application materials accordingly. Use their verbs. Now, you know, I was going to say something about that as a creative writer. I just went to a session that was offered by somebody who writes video games, and they said verbs are so important to us. What is the verb that our players can do when they're playing this video game? That guides our whole creation of it. The verbs that people use in the job ad, the verbs that people use in their mission statement, those verbs should also be in your materials, showing that you know and understand what it is that they do and what it is that you have done and what you will be doing. And using the same verbs to describe appropriately the correct thing helps them very quickly understand how well you and what you've done in the past fit moving forward. I also love that Ashraf said, warn your letter of recommendation writers. As somebody who writes hundreds of letters of recommendation, I absolutely love it when a student tells me when we met, right? How long I have known them, because that saves me from having to go look it up. And the easier you can make writing that letter of recommendation for me, oh my gosh, the better. Even if I already love you, because I probably do. I love you even more when you tell me when we met, how long we've known each other, what you did in my lab or when you worked with me, and special skills that you think I can talk about that maybe other recommenders can't talk about. So give me those bullet items. And I also love what Arif said about rejection, and everybody kind of touched on rejection. As a creative writer, rejection is part of our lives. We are submitting short stories to different magazines all the time, and they can only publish 12 and they get 900 submissions. So rejection was really hard at the beginning of my creative writing career. And then also applying for jobs, rejection was really difficult. So I applied for several different English faculty jobs and had interviews, and I did end up taking a professor position at a community college for a while, and that was really, really fun. But here at Iowa State University, this professional development position is so delightful to me and is the perfect fit for me and my skills. I applied to this current job that I have had right now, that I have for 20 years. I applied for it 3 times, and I just was not going to take no for an answer. I applied for it. Somebody worked for it in 6 months and decided it was not a good fit for them, and they left, and I applied for it again. Somebody else worked in this job for like a year and then quit, and I applied again, right? Because I knew this was where I wanted to be. So don't let that rejection get you down. If it's a place that you know you want to work, keep it on your radar. Sign up for an email to be sent to you whenever a new job opens up at that place. Also, he mentioned that the job landscape, especially around diversity statements, is changing. So this picture is showing that this person navigating this extreme change, sometimes the next peg that you need to jump to is different than it has been for anyone before. And that includes states like Iowa, Florida, Texas that have been passing certain laws that say you can't ask a candidate to turn in a diversity statement. But then other states where having a diversity statement is absolutely vital, like California, right? So find the professional developers at your school, even if you're in Iowa or Texas or Florida or other places that have anti-DEI legislation. There's still experts on your campus who teach this area. And even if we've been told we're not allowed to teach it, or well, we're not allowed to assign it as homework, which is one thing we've been told at Iowa State, we can still teach it to you, even if we can't assign it to you. It can't be compulsory, but we still would love to teach you and help you if you want to apply for a job in California, but happen to be in a state right now that is limited. Also, committees cannot, in some states, ask for a DEI statement. So they're trying to get that information that they wanted from the DEI statement from all of your other documents. So mention how you're a great collaborator. Mention the things that you do to lower barriers of learning for all peoples. Mention the things that you will perform in your position that show that you're not against others, that you help and support others, and you understand some of the issues that hold others back. Okay, I loved the shared Google Sheet idea of like, here's how you know me. When somebody sends me their CV, I'm like, okay, I have to dig through the CV. I really like to have a shorter bulleted list. Here's the skills, including your references and sharing the Google Sheet with them. That's kind of a cool idea. And you can say, I think Dr. So-and-so can talk about these things. I think Dr. somebody else can talk about these things, right? Indicating how these letters are going to work together might even be a great idea. Oh, that's cool. Okay, Katie. I love that she talked about soft skills so much as a professional developer. I'm like, woohoo, yeah. But again, there are people like me at your institution who just can't wait for you to walk in and say, hi, I would like more training in leadership. What you got? Right? I want to learn better written and oral communication. What do we have here? Networking can be taught to you. Team building skills can be taught to you. Right. And I love how Katie went over and over this again. I have a picture of chess here because it's very strategic for you. This is impressive to hiring committees. Katie shared with us over and over how having had that leadership course, having excelled at the 3-minute thesis, all of these things, very impressive to the committee. Because you know what? This indicates that you are striving to grow as an individual. Not only did you work on some skills and learn some of them and are bringing these to the institution or wherever it is you're going to work, but you've also shown that just being awesome at the science isn't 100% of the job. These soft skills are tremendously important. Okay. She also mentioned informational interviews, which I know about as a professional developer, but had never heard of before I joined the professional development unit. It's not something many of you have heard of, that you can contact somebody and say, what is it that you do for your job? But I can tell you, you maize geneticists are very special people. I have heard such good things about how helpful you all are to each other and what a great maize genetics community you have. And so the informational interview might be awkward in some majors, but you maize geneticists, wow. Assume that the kind people that you've heard today are all over your field, because I can tell you, this being my 3rd year doing this, all of the people who've come and talked are just wonderful and would give you a great informational interview. So please don't be too shy. And 2 people mentioned looking up salaries. There's a federal law that if federal funding was used for something, these salaries have to be published. And what you can do is, even if you're applying to work at a private company or a private institution that doesn't publish salaries or isn't funded federally, you can look at a nearby similar federally funded institute like a state university or nonprofit Katie mentioned, and see what the salaries are in a comparable job that you're going to apply to. And that will help you understand how to negotiate for the private institution. Not every institution has enough money to negotiate. Some of them might return to you and say, well, we have to have this number because it's mandated by our department, right? It's mandated and they can't really negotiate very much. But you can negotiate for other things like an extra teaching assistant right away, or maybe less teaching requirements during your first semester and more teaching requirements during your second semester. Office space, equipment that you need for your lab, a great parking spot. There are other things you can negotiate for, even if they don't have enough money to match something that you're being offered in industry. Also keep in mind that universities have really, really good insurance and health insurance, especially if you're looking at a big health change in your life, like considering having some children. You might think about, even if a university is paying less than industry, it might have way better health insurance and also vacation and sick leave. Like, I have so much vacation and sick leave. I've had so many like $40,000 surgeries that only cost me $15 because I work at a university. Like, you guys really think about that. Okay, Katie mentioned networking again. I want to add to that. I haven't yet said, help other people get to know you. I've said, go and network, get to know people, be nice. We know you're all nice because you're Mays geneticists. And there's a very high nice quotient in the Mays geneticists, I've noticed. But help people get to know you. Tell them what you research. Tell them what you're most proud of about yourself. Tell them what you want to go do in the future. Assume they would like to mentor you, right? Help them get to know who you are and what you bring, because when someone else is randomly talking to them about something they need, they'll mention you and be like, oh, I talked to so-and-so and they were doing research in this area and they're good at blah, blah, blah. You should reach out to them and, you know, think about them joining your team, right? This networking only works when people know who you are. So get good at telling people about who you are and what you do. Again, I've already said, always assume, right, that you are wanted until someone proves that they are a jerk. Go ahead. Don't let your shyness and like, oh, nobody likes me, nobody wants to hang out with me, right? Fake it until you make it, right? Assume that everybody would like to have you there, right? Don't let yourself get shy about that. And I loved how Katie said, look at the holes in your CV. How can you grow? But I want you to do that in a way that celebrates your strengths. And I'll talk to that more in a second here. Again, know that place you're applying to. What are their mission statements? Use their verbs. What are their facilities? Mention people you can collaborate with, right? How, in all of your job materials, how do you fit the institution? But I want you to be thinking also, how do they fit you? Right? Katie talked about life balance, work-life integration, because there's never really a very good balance, is there? Work-life integration, how work and your personal life integrate together. So like, what is important for you for where you live in the country? I'm a little bit geographically bound because I have a Christmas tree farm and my 89-year-old mother lives on it, and we are still planting Christmas trees, and I need to be within a certain geographic radius that I can still come and help plant. Okay, let's move on to Nicholas. I love going on zip lines and tree walking tours and stuff, even though I am terrified of heights and I also get motion sickness. But even just looking at this person walking on this bouncy bridge makes me feel both happy and afraid. And I know that that's how you feel when you're applying to jobs, both happy and afraid. But I love that we've got this overlapping wisdom from our presenters. It's like scientific results. If the results and success of people are saying the same thing across different applications, different job fields, right? Just like science, this means it's a successful method. And yet, we don't do it. We do the same things in our lives, even if they're not working for us, because humans are creatures of habit, right? When we learn that the same thing used over and over again still isn't giving us success, we need to change that method, right? Acknowledge that your doubt isn't proven, right? Don't let your self-doubt make you believe somehow everyone else is more talented than you. Use that same scientific method. You're like, I'm terrible. And then you go, okay, well, what scientific evidence do I have of that? I failed one test, or I forgot to email someone back quickly enough in this way, right? Is that really scientifically proven demonstration of the fact that you suck? No, like you failed one time. Look at the 70 other emails that you sent on time, right? And this bouncy bridge, this winding path is normal, right? Enjoy the walk, even if it's a little bit scary. So I've already mentioned the first point, corn people are good people. I've seen this again and again through my 30 years at Iowa State University in the depth of corn land here, right? Corn people, they're just, I don't know what it is about you guys, but you're just good people. You have built-in collaborative networks in both industry and academia. And the longer you're in this, the more great people you meet. And even if you don't know these people yet, they're just friends you haven't met yet. You are not alone when you're going into these new places and making these new friends. Also, don't forget to reach backward for all the support and connections you've made so far. Remember to be reaching backward. It might even still be valid to continue an informal friendship and relationship with whoever mentored you in your bachelor's, right? Like, it's not like they suddenly stopped working with Corn after you left, unless they retired. In which case, email them anyway and say, how are you enjoying your retirement? Right? Keep these connections open. It can be just fine to send somebody a one-sentence email that says, I'm thinking of you. Hope you're having a great week. That's okay. It's okay to like people and to be nice to them throughout your life. Okay, let's talk about work-life integration a little bit more. I love that Nicholas touched on this. Is that job a good fit for your life? What is important to you? Will this job support that? Again, are your doubts and uncertainty valid? Investigate deeply as you think about it. And then don't be afraid to transition to a different job if this job isn't a good fit for you. We humans, we're creatures of habit. Something good is working for us. We cling to it. And when it starts to go bad, we cling to it. And then things get worse and we cling to it. And we don't stop and say, maybe my skills and talents are better elsewhere. Maybe somewhere else would be a better fit for me, right? The sure thing is wonderful, but also think about how you can grow and change. Many presenters in the Maize Genetics Council in the past 2 years have had lots of different jobs and have moved to different places and been fluid with the good corn people between different good corn people applications. So keep that graceful transition that keeps your networks open as a thought in your future. Okay, another comment about not being a jerk. That's pretty vague. How do I not be a jerk? I've already got being a corn person going for me. Think about the mentoring you've had that has been successful, and think about the things you wish your mentor had done or had been. There's been different mentoring relationships that have worked really well for you and others that haven't. And it doesn't necessarily mean that person's a bad mentor. It could have just been a not right time at your life or their life, or it could just be they have strengths and your strengths don't quite coincide the right time. Keep these things in mind for your students, your grad students, and your coworkers and the people that you're training. Try and be the mentor you wish you had, and stay open to the ideas and thoughts that if these are not working out, maybe it would be better for them and their learning to have a different mentor, and be thinking about how you can gracefully support transitions as well. I love that someone mentioned perfect is the enemy of done. Perfect is the enemy of good is what one people, right? Climb the hill and plant your flag and move on to the next hill. That's what this little astronaut is doing. We are claiming this hill in the name of science. We are putting the plant flag here. There's a beautiful corn stalk on our little flag, and then we are moving on to the next, moving on to the next hill. I know you've all heard the story of the teacher who taught pottery, and for one class they assigned people got a good grade if they made as many pots as possible. And in the other pottery class, they said, you know, you get graded on one pot, the perfect pot. You only have to make one pot and you get graded on its perfection. And we all know that the end of that story was that the people who just made as many pots as humanly possible made the best pots overall compared to the people who tried to just make the one perfect pot. So I want you to be continuing to think about that in your career, that perfection really can be the enemy of getting things done. We do have to do things correctly, and but we have to turn them in on time. We have to turn them in. We have to turn them in on time and then move on to the next one, because you have a big, long, beautiful, rich life ahead of you with lots and lots of different experiences. So make motion, keep going. I love this one. Say no. Say no. Say no so that you can say yes when it really matters. We love to please people. We love to please people. People ask us to do stuff all the time. And we say, oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. And we think about it. Do I have time to do this? Oh, yes. Practice saying, no, let me think about it. No, let me talk to my advisor. No, let me consult with my mentors first. Spend time really thinking about these opportunities, the time it is going to take to do them, and how that time is being taken away from something else, because it is. We are finite. We like to think that we are little brain machines on a little brain machine wheel that doesn't need sleep or food or entertainment, right? We need our bread and circuses. We need our entertainment as well as our food and our sleep. Say no so that you can say yes when the most awesome opportunity comes along, when the people in your family and in your life need you. Okay, so the bottom line, what do we got here? Build those soft skills. Not just build them, but also have something so that you can show committee members that you went and built them. Get something that can appear on your CV that you did this leadership seminar or you did this other thing, so that it really shows that you are a good communicator, that you are a good leader, good team builder, right? And here's the comment I wanted to make on, yes, seeking professional development and, filling in those holes on your CV. But I want you to think about the areas you need to grow, but don't sacrifice building your strengths just to focus on your weaknesses. What I'm talking about here is over obsessing about your weaknesses. Katie says, I'm an introvert. I need that introvert time to think. I need that introvert time to recharge, right? I've become a good extrovert in presenting. I've become a good extrovert in leading. But Katie still honors the fact that she's an introvert. She needs thinking time. She needs recovery time, alone time, right? Don't become someone you're not and don't want to be and don't heal from being. Just to fulfill some of those weaknesses. Katie did a great balance of, I learned the competence. I know how to be a good presenter and a good speaker, and I have all those skills, but I also honor who I am as an introvert, right? And Katie has built on the things that she's naturally good at outside of just getting up to competency on the ways that we're weak. Okay. And again, I want to remind you, this road is a winding road. Of course, all of you are singing that song. This road is a winding road. Anyway, but you're surrounded by wonderful corn people, right? There are many travelers on this road, the professional developers at your current institution who are, happy to see you and yelling for your success and your enjoyment of life. Right? There are many, many travelers on your winding road, and you feel lonely sometimes. But I want you to remember that there's people out there that can't wait to meet you. And that final note that we were told in our last presenter, don't self-reject, right? I will not publish 100% of the stories that I not send. I need to send this deep piece of my emotional self out into the world and have an editor say, no, thank you. So that the editor that really wants to buy my story can say yes. The same thing I have heard from my 1,000 preparing future faculty students who are out there now being faculty. I never would have thought I would have gotten a job at this institution. I would have never applied for this job except my mentor made me. And I did, and I got the job, and I was like, oh, don't self-reject yourself from a job that you're like, this job would be incredible. I'm an incredible fit, but oh God, Carnegie Mellon will never hire me, or wherever will quote unquote never hire. No, apply for the job, especially if you're an international person and you're like, oh, they're not going to hire an international person for this because I need a visa and I need to have help getting citizenship or whatever, and I need all these things, so they're never going to hire me because I'm international. That is simply not true. I had a student really worried. They're an agricultural engineer and they're like, I can't get a job in industry. I've tried again and again, and I'm really struggling getting a job in industry, and I think it's because I'm international. So I wrote everybody in that field who had graduated from my major in the last 20 years, from that major in the last 20 years at Iowa State. And I said, what's going on at your universities right now? Were you prevented from getting a job, or was it hard to get a job because you were international? And now that you're serving on job committees, are they having any problem hiring somebody because they're international? And they're like, oh, we can't choose that. And they're like, absolutely not. It is, how good is the person a fit for this job? How well did they interview? It has nothing to do on whether or not they need a visa or, on none of those things. We want the best people who are the best fit to work at our institution. So don't reject yourself from a job because you're like, oh, I might need a visa. That's not what's important. The people want to meet you and be friends with you. And the corn community is an international community that feeds the world, right? So don't self-reject because of that. I love the statement, you only need the one job, guys. You only need the one job. You can't say yes to all 20 jobs that you apply for. You only need the one job. You're going to have to reject them, right? So why shouldn't you expose yourself to some more of those rejections as well? Okay, that's it for me.
Okay, Karen, thank you so much for connecting the lines between everyone. And also, I really want to thank Arif and Katie and Nick and Karen for saying yes to this and saving the no for something else. But really appreciate it and appreciate you all coming today and sharing your stories with everyone in our community. We do have a great community in the Maze genetics group. And Karen will have to get you to a Maze meeting one of these days. They're a lot of fun. While I wait with some the remaining time to get some questions in the chat, if you want to ask a question to any of the speakers, just write in the chat who you'd like to direct a question to. But for now, I'm going to start off our question and discussion session with a question to our speakers. I'll start with Arif, which is, what is one thing that you wish you would have known during your postdoc that may have helped you in terms of navigating the career market?
There are actually many, but I think like everyone used to tell that, oh, it's very normal to go through like multiple job cycle and round. So which practically they're saying that you will get many rejections sometimes for the whole season. I think like some of my mentors would prepare me like more details that, okay, it will be a lot of rejections and something like that. Many of the things I think like I learned during that season, right, the academic cycle, that I got the rejection and then I went back and I was telling my mentor, oh, these two schools just rejected me the same week. And then she'll say, okay, don't worry, like, do you know who is in such committees? I'll say, yeah, I have some idea. And then she'll say, you can just reach out to them and see what you are missing, because these are major plant department across the country. So if they feel that you are missing something, that is definitely missing. So I wish I knew it, even before submitting those applications. And if I just summarize, I have a tendency to keep talking, that it would save a lot of the time, between the application cycle. If I knew that, okay, I should immediately reach out, because there is some rejection we get early in the same round, and the some application opens up later. So I could just use the time to improve and use that in the same application round.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And one thing you mentioned is that you're going to have to go multiple times and to learn from these rejections. And it's part of it. So I think that's an important piece of advice. Katie, if you'd like to share next, and then we go to Nick.
Yeah, mine's not gonna be as good. To be honest, I was not ready to go on the job market, but this sort of dream position opened up and I said, okay, I'll apply. So, but I think that looking back, like something I wish I had known is that being a postdoc was like the greatest job ever. I absolutely love my job, but it's a lot more stressful than being a postdoc. It's a lot more work than being a postdoc. And I think that like that is a phase of life where I had just absolute freedom to the research I wanted, and I had a lot less meetings and other stuff that's part of my job. So I would say if you are a postdoc, sort of enjoy the ride as well. And same with being a grad student, although that there was a lot of other difficulties. But yeah, I wish I had recognized at the time how wonderful being a postdoc is.
That's funny. You're not the first person to say that being the postdoc was the best job I ever had. So that's cool, and I'll incorporate that into my daily activities. Being a postdoc. Nick, do you have any things you wish you'd known during your postdoc?
Yeah, I mean, there's not just one. I think one thing I learned eventually that would have helped me earlier on is not being so fixated on a single type of career path. I found I became a lot more happy and excited for all the types of different jobs that I could apply for when I knew I didn't want to do, I don't want to do academia, or I don't want to do, I was so, sometimes I was fixated, like, I want to do academia, I want to try to be a professor, I want to try to do this. And when I realized, there's great science out there that companies do, there's great science out there that, government does, nonprofits, teaching, I would have been, when I realized like I can find satisfaction in a lot of these ways and scratch my scientific itch in lots of different ways, I became a lot happier. And that took a little while, but yeah, that would be the thing I would. There's lots of ways to become fulfilled with the skill sets we've developed.
Well, that's great. I building on that, I would say then, or the next question I have is actually, what is the most fulfilling aspect of your career, and kind of where do you see it going? And I can start with Nick. We'll go reverse order this time.
Yeah. To be honest, the thing that I get the most satisfaction about, it's probably two things. It's one, it's engaging and talking with other scientists. So like at meetings, of course, I love the maze meeting. It's my favorite meeting. I'll say that. I'm a sorghum guy, but I love the maze meeting. But the thing that's really part of that gives me the most fulfillment is honestly engaging with especially early career scientists. And honestly, the reason I kept saying like help out, you're never too busy to help, is I really just enjoy helping people. And so it's doing things like this give me a lot of fulfillment, and I really, really enjoy them. I'm not trying to suck up. It's, I get a lot of satisfaction trying to help other people out, whether it's the research or something else. That just makes me feel better at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's something I was thinking about as you all were talking about networking, is the idea that like this is part of it, getting to know each other. Like every person you meet is and can be part of your network. And as Karen mentioned, it's important, and Katie also, developing those connections over time. It's not just meeting someone once, but keeping these conversations going is part of it. And as Karen mentioned about looking back, I mean, everybody that you meet throughout your journey, throughout your career, is part of your network, and you will rely. Think about this all the time with my fellow postdocs. We're going to rely on each other to come give talks at our institutes, to collaborate on papers and lean on their expertise for these things. So I like these things too, obviously. Okay, Katie, your turn.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with everything that's been said, and I'll just add, Jason, to what you just commented on, which is that plant science is a very, very small world. I realized this when I was in graduate school, but like never flip people off when you're driving, because they could be your next collaborator. It's just careers are long, the world is very small, and you will see all these people over and over again. But I think, like I told you, that probably being a postdoc was my favorite job. This is my dream job. I still absolutely love my job. And I think what's most fulfilling, what really gets me up in the morning, is I can now see the reach that my science has. As a postdoc, it was me, and yes, I was on a team, but it was a little more isolated, even though I was mentoring a student. But now that I work with so many people and sort of have the power that I didn't have before. I can see both my science having a reach as well as who I am. Like I'm seeing the effect on young women in science because I have a voice now that I maybe didn't have before. And the projects that I can take on with a team are much larger. And so that impact is really close by.
Yeah, so it just keeps building and building on these connections that you make, and now in this position, you're able to do even so much more. That's great.
Yeah.
All right, Arif.
Yeah, I think I didn't forget the question. What is the fulfilling or satisfactory part? What I really like about in this position right now. So for example, I go to the meeting and I see Dave Jackson, all the senior people, and they will be so nice to me and they will tell so many stories from their 30 years. And sometimes some of the collaborators and the senior people in the field who are like a legend. And I searched about their, some oldest paper and found that, oh, he did his PhD even before I born, and he take me so seriously even after such a long career. On the other end, what I see, I'll have an undergrad in the lab, and she'll come and say, oh, it's my 20th birthday. I feel so old. And I feel like, oh my God, they're so young. So I have that, see some people achieve so much. And then I learn from them. And then some people, they didn't even get into the field. I actually can teach them and, mentor them. So for instance, like today is a very happy day for me. One of the students joined my lab. She's lab tech. So we wrote a very small preview article, and that article is online in Developmental Cell. And I feel like so happy. I was not happy for me, but for her. Like I just keep sending everybody. So I think that is a very satisfactory part. Not to be mentor, but also being the mentor for somebody else is kind of a very nice spot with this job.
Yeah, I think that's one of the really great things about our reach is that, from where we are, we can make connections and be mentored and also be the mentor. So it's very important. Well, I think with that, we can wrap up our seminar. If anybody has any last minute questions, they could try to throw it in the chat now. But I want to thank you all so much for coming today. And we have one more question before I do my thing from Paul. Let's see. Paul asks, what are the key technical skills that every employer wants now, both industry and academia? And also, what are the pointers to consider when drafting your research statement? So what do you think are the kind of the most, because in terms of in job applications, the technical skills?
I can go for technical skills. I'll
Perfect,
tell you,
thank you.
like what I look for, and even not on my team, but when I help other people hire, is absolutely statistics. Because science is not real unless you can prove that one thing is that your hypothesis is true or false, and that all comes down to statistics. So that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be an expert, but I look for that people have taken at least one class. When people come and present their research, or I'm sort of chatting with them about their science, I look that, are their error bars correct, right? Does it look accurate? And am I asking them the right questions? So make sure you know at least basic statistics. Other techniques will change. It's not like I look for someone who's an expert in tissue culture or even phenotyping. As long as they can do some of the basic stats, I know that they can do good science.
I was probably going to say statistics too, and just so to say something a little different, I think generally being a pretty good technical writer is something that will send you very, very far. So again, whether it's being able to write up a summary, for an industry research thing, or writing up a manuscript, being able to communicate differently will, in an efficient and kind of quick way, which takes practice, is going to send you very far. And it kind of is one thing that it shows in your research statement. It shows in how you draft up your application package. That all shows and comes across there too. And so it's kind of essentially fundamental to the entire process in the first place. But yes, I would say statistics is like an actual hard skill too.
Yes, I'll add with Nick and also Katie, the statistics and the technical writing. This you cannot avoid at all. Any piece of things you write for the grant and paper, everything actually shows up. Other thing I'll say, like the excitement is very important. Like when you go, you have to be excited. And the one of the thing I'll tell because that in-person interview is designed in a way that you can fake 1 hour your excitement if it is Zoom or something. But once you go on the campus, man, you cannot fake it for the whole day. So if you're not originally excited, that will come out at some point, right?
Yeah, very good. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so I'll wrap up now unless anybody has anything else. Like I said, like I was saying, I appreciate everyone for participating today. I'm looking forward to seeing you all at the Maze meeting. Get together, come see us, and chat with us. To the organizers, Thu and Manwinder and myself, as part of the Maze Genetics Co-op membership committee. If you're not part of the Maze Genetics Co-op, you can join. If cost is prohibitive, there are you can send us an email and you could get a free membership as well. Yes, thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. I learned a lot here. Karen, again, really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Couldn't do it without you. And everyone, thanks for coming. Have a great day. I'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I just want to say the last thank you to all the speakers today. You guys are amazing.